I am playing a 2200 international master. Welcome back to another recap, this time from my bed because my laptop absolutely needs to charge. I was playing the black pieces against an IM who's in his 60s. He started with d4, and I go with a move which I've almost never played before over the board. I go with knight f6. As you may know, I am a very typical d5 player, but I went with knight f6, trying to play some new material that I've been studying for actually a month now, and my opponent just completely sidesteps it. What I had prepared was against c4, I had some very special things that you might see in future recaps. My opponent goes knight f3, and now I go e6, and now bishop g5. And this marks the Torre attack. Now, I have been prepping knight f6 for so long in deeper lines, deeper openings, that I just forgot about different move orders. And that's a big problem when you're faced against this at the board and you don't really know what to do. So bishop g5 played, and now I just think logically and I attack the center with c5. So c5 here, e3, and now I go with knight c6. Just again developing a piece, attacking the center. Knight bd2, and now I'm realizing that the Torre attack has become a sort of London system very quickly with a bishop on g5. And what marks the weakness of the London system is this b2 pawn. And you might realize that I took a long time here on this turn because I was looking at queen b6, just very obviously. But queen b6, I didn't really love. Oh no, now there's knight c4. Wait, 2 moves ago I was thinking of queen b6 here. I didn't eventually play it. I went with this and then quickly b6. And now I have a slight time disadvantage. b6's goal is to solidify the pawn structure, number one, and I want to go with a nice bishop on this diagonal. This game becomes way more chaotic now because I don't know the opening, so I have to take a lot of care for every single move, and it takes a lot of time to really produce quality when you don't know the opening. So that's why you should learn your openings, to just save time over the board and know your positions, know the plans of the openings that you play. c3 is played here, solid. I try to kick the bishop with h6. My opponent goes with bishop h4. And here's the conundrum. What would you do? Play g5 or just develop with bishop e7? I felt the urge to really not go with bishop e7 because you can trade here on f6 and I just give this e4 square, and an eventual e4, e5 looks really good for the white pieces. So I just went extremely aggressive with g5. I really didn't learn my lesson from my tournament in Cambridge, in which I went for the g5 in a very similar opening, and I also lost that against an IM. So bishop g3, and now I go bishop e7. And after bishop d3 here, white has phenomenal development. I mean, just every piece is on its best square, whereas I'm a bit tardy in mine. My bishop is very nice, but my knight here is, okay, severely undefended. My knight here is nice, but really can't improve for the time being. And my bishop is just doesn't know what to do in life. g7, e7, we don't know, and I'm pretty far from castling. The reason is, I think I'm really badly developed here, is that this square is so nice, and if a knight is let on e5 and we trade, let's say, and a pawn is here, my dark squares are extremely weak. So it's very important for my bishop to choose the right square as to where I want to control my dark squares. So let's say bishop here, I just hate something like this, or even knight c4 directly. Isn't that scary? So I really can't play whatever here. And so instead, I opt to just eliminate the dark square bishop with knight h5. This is an extremely risky move. The engines will tell you it's equal, but on the board itself, black is really behind in development and doesn't need to play another knight move on top of the 2 pawn moves here. But chasing the bishop pair is a pretty good plan in my opinion. You can't go wrong if you have the bishop pair over your opponent. My opponent here has several options. You can go knight e5, which has a discovered attack on my knight, and then I would have to take the bishop as I want to, h takes g3, and then, well, it's up for interpretation. I think I would have gone bishop g7, and okay, I'm letting f4, but it looks okay for black. The engine gives equal, so I'm pretty happy with this. My opponent also has a secondary move which he played in that bishop e5. And the idea, and also why bishop d3 was played a couple moves ago, is that if I go f6 now, there's bishop g6 check, and I just drop a full knight. So here I have to take the bishop. I want to take the bishop anyways, and this is where it gets interesting. White gets a small edge after d takes e5, because my knight can't go back to f6, and my knight would look very ugly on g7, having no other squares to bounce back to. But my opponent here was scared of g4, which is a real resource. Here I'm attacking the knight, and suddenly the knight has no squares. Honestly, it has to go to g1, and now I would have bishop takes g2, and I'm pretty much winning. But here my opponent has bishop e4, the intermediate move, not even acting on this attacked knight. And if I take knight takes, sacking the knight once more, once I take the knight here, queen takes f3. Attacking my knight, if my knight goes back, it's pretty much over with check and then castles, and there's not much I can do about this. So this was a possible line, but my opponent instead went for knight takes, which is very calming. I've been struggling in this opening ever since move 3. And for knight takes e5 to happen on the board really puts my heart at peace, because now I just go back with my knight, right? It was attacked. And what does white do, right? Here you can improve the position a bit, but I'm not like getting destroyed. So white castles, and now I go with, okay, so I want to kick this knight, right? Again, it's like, I want to do this and play normally like a normal person, but f4 things are so scary. All the time it was like this. And like, takes, I'm gonna castle on this, and just like there's f5, I don't feel comfortable with this, and I think it's understandable. So here I play a6, a prophylactic move. No, not even, just a preventative move. I want to go with d6 here, and prevent any bishop b5 checks on my king, which would be a catastrophe. So I just want to kick this knight, and oddly enough, this knight has only, well, it has 3 squares. Okay, yeah, no, it's not bad. The knight is doing well. Never mind. So e4 is played now, and now I felt like the need to just like attack this knight. Knight goes to g4. What would you do? Would you take the knight? Would you play bishop g7 and develop and castle soon? Or would you play knight d7 to play bishop g7 and attack the pawn? Or would you play knight h5 and go for knight f4 things? So I had 4 options here. I was calculating everything, working my brains out, and this is the best move, although I really didn't like my position after queen takes this and then just queen g3. And I feel like this attack, mundane, it's not happening. Here instead, the engine prefers black a slight little bit after bishop g7. So attacking this weakness, d5 would be played, and now engine is deciding on a move bishop c8. It's like hard to find. It's understandable that I miss bishop c8. I looked at this, but I didn't love it. So then you look at bishop g7. If you said this, I respect it, like knight takes, bishop takes. I almost played this, as this is the closest thing I was gonna play. And here d5 would have been strong for white. Yeah, bishop g7 is a very okay move. Now, there's also h5 I considered, which is not bad, but then knight f3, bishop g7, this is also not bad. I also considered this during the game, so I could have went either way. I went with bishop g7. Okay, I went with bishop g7. I thought I went with knight d7. I think I went next. Okay, so after bishop g7, my opponent didn't take. I was sure my opponent would take. So he went knight e3, and now I'm like, what do I do? Like, I was only calculating knight takes f6 forever, and then knight e3 is played, and strategically I have to think smartly here. White has the center. I have low space, which means that black wants an endgame and black wants to trade off pieces. So what better thing to do than to go knight d7? d5 is played here. So a very nice pawn. If I go e5, I basically jail my bishop forever, so I don't want to do that. And if I take, it looks really ugly for me. I mean, the e-file open, my bishop is played against completely, my bishop is jailed on b7. I don't love this either. So on d5, I have to think smartly, and I go for this knight e5, which is really nice. And now I actually take themes from another opening called the Benoni. In the Benoni, you might get a bishop here. Most oftentimes you'll get a bishop here, and most oftentimes you'll get two pawns like this taking up this f4 square to prevent f4, and you'll get a knight on e5 to kick a bishop on d3. It's very thematic, on the money for the Benoni, which I found was a great coincidence because I've been lost for the past 10 moves, and now I find a small resource. So I tempo the bishop, my opponent goes knight c4, which was surprising, and immediately I play the best move, knight takes d3, just taking all the bishops off the board. I don't want this position to be a closed one because the knights would outperform my bishops most likely. So my goal now is to completely shatter open the position. I go with another tempo move, b5, knight goes back. And so now I go with another tempo move, c4, kicking the queen to e2. I really like this because the queen is off its centralized square. But now how do I continue, right? I have the bishop pair. The position is pretty closed. No pawns have been traded off. So what should I do? I should castle here, but on castles, there's probably f4. I was really scared of f4 the entire game. Even sometimes I was already castled, and I was like, why is my opponent not playing f4? It was crazy. I go queen e7 first. Here I'm threatening to take this. So my opponent goes rook ae1, perfect move, and then I go castles. And now I'm wondering why my opponent does not go f4. Like, it just looks completely crushing. On takes, rook takes, I would almost have to play nothing against it and just let f5 in. And I really don't know how I'm defending this. Takes, e takes, and queen d8. It's hard to find queen d8 is what I'm saying. On queen f6, you kind of get crushed with queen f3 for knight e4. No, I didn't like f4, but I was going with castles anyways, and my opponent goes with queen h5. I'm already surprised my opponent doesn't go with f4, but then to play queen h5, threatening knight g4 is really scary too. So I go queen f6, defending. And this is perhaps a mistake because now my opponent takes on e6, and I realize that if I take back with my pawn, I don't defend this g6 square anymore, so that after knight g4, I can't play queen g6, and I lose a pawn on h6 basically. Whereas here, I was just prepared to do this, right, and defend this adequately. But now takes happened on the board, and if I take back with the queen, probably f4 is going to happen. So I took back with the pawn anyways, and I found a resource here. On knight g4, I played queen f4, attacking this knight. And now wherever you go with your knight, let's say knight here, I can just take on e4 with my bishop and eventually just play like king here and bishop here. Or I'm threatening queen f7 as well. So just like king here, queen f7, trading off queens, even better. So I was really happy about queen f4, and I was looking at all the alternatives, all the possibilities. Knight f3. I was looking at knight b1. I was looking at rook d1. I was like, these are the only possible moves that my opponent can play. Knight e3 diffuses your attack, you would never play it. Rook here, I have king h7, and I'm coming in with queen f7, and I'm trading queens into an endgame with a bishop pair. I was so happy about this. And then my opponent stuns me. And he goes with rook e3. Rook e3 shields my attack of this knight and also reinvigorates this threat here. And now if I go king h7, which I did in the game, but yeah, I don't have any other choice. Now I was thinking you can just go rook h3 and I'm losing a pawn. But actually I have bishop takes, knight takes, and now bishop g6 would win for black. So it was important for white to find the knight f3, which he played in seconds. And I was even more shocked to see knight f3 on the board. Knight f3 here, and I cannot take on e4 anymore because rook takes is a brilliant move, queen takes, and then knight takes g5, and I lose my queen and the game. So I can't defend like this with takes and then bishop g6, but I'm still trying to get that queen out of there because g3 is threatened. and my queen won't defend g5 much longer and won't defend h6 much longer. So I play bishop c6, which is the best move actually. g3 is played. I go bishop e8 on time. Here there's many things that white can do. If you take, I take, and I'm extremely happy because I'm winning. And if you take my bishop, I can take your knight, and it's a crazy line in which both our queens were hanging, and now my queen is defending e6. Like, it's so nice. So it's such a coincidence too. Queen c6, and then I would probably just like defend my pawn, and this is equal. Crazy. But there is one move that's very, very nice, and it's the patient queen h3. And now my queen is attacked, and I have to forfeit this pawn here. Or I can do something else. If I go queen here, my queen's trapped, right? So if queen here, there's knight takes g5 check. Ay, 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 it's a fork. So I have to sack my queen for a knight and rook. Now this is not all that bad, and I was not like upset going into this endgame if I can get my wheels turning. My king is a little bit unsafe, but I do have the bishop pair, and I have a nice pawn structure here. So if I can make some convincing counterplay, it can be all right for black. Knight e3 was played, best move attacking this pawn, and now I go bishop d7. I should be going for rook f6 instead. Okay, this would invite this, and then a draw offer, maybe, no. Rook here, there's f4, g takes, rook takes. Yeah, it's hard. It's just a hard position to play. So I played bishop d7, which is a mistake because it gives, whoops, oh, well, my opponent attacked my rook. I played rook f7, best move, and now rook d1, and it's really hard to defend this. So I have two options. I could play bishop here, or I could play bishop here. Engine says d5, which is crazy, takes, and queen h5 here, because I was attacking the queen. And now I have to go like bishop e6, and I give a pawn. Don't love this either. So I play bishop e5, which is a good looking move. It defends this. I think bishop f8 is better, but just more passive. Oh no, it's not better. This is better somewhat. Engine likes giving the pawn here on d6 after queen moves from the discovered attack. Rook f6, this just looks too nice for white. I can't do that. So I go with bishop e5, queen h5 happened in the game, and now bishop e8. The reason is I have to anticipate knight g4 here, which attacks this, and my pawn is still attacked on d4. So I really have to mitigate all the risk here. So I go bishop e8, queen h3. Yeah, if you have this, I have bishop g7, and now if you take, I can take here on f2 with a discovered attack, and I can try to survive. So queen h3 was played, attacking this, also threatening this behind the scenes. It's a lot. I go bishop d7, knight g4, bishop g7, and now after takes, this is kind of like the fall of my position. I can't defend everything here. And bishop g7, rook takes, rook f8, rook takes a6, taking that extra pawn. And now I go for e5, pinning this knight to the queen. I could go with something stale like rook e7, but I thought, I'm already lost. I have to go for it all. e5, we're both in extreme time pressure. He could still mess up. He plays rook takes h6. I go king g8, which I thought would be something he would miss, but no, he plays really nicely, rook g6, threatening knight h6. I take on f2. The knight is pinned, so you can't act on it right now, but you have to find rook takes g7 check to win. King takes check, king goes back, and then knight takes f2, and here I'm down a rook for a queen, and I resign. My second loss in a row in this tournament. I was paired against an IM after losing my last game to an FM. Imagine that. You lose to an FM, they pair you against an IM with a slightly worse tournament. And there you have it. I have 1 out of 4. This is my worst start to any tournament I've played in so far since the beginning of our chess journey in August 2023. Tomorrow, I play an 1899 Spanish player with the white pieces. Wish me luck.